Anjali was an ordinary nurse navigating an extraordinary life of resilience. Her days began before sunrise, marked by the bustling energy of the hospital's endless corridors. Like every other morning, she stepped into the hospital ready to serve, yet something about today felt different. A heavy weight in her chest, an inexplicable unease. The monotony of her routine concealed the depth of her struggles she faced silently with a smile. The hospital, for Anjali, was not just a place of work, but a battleground. As a woman of color, she faced microaggressions and outright bias from colleagues and patients alike. While she worked tirelessly to care for others, she often felt invisible, her efforts overlooked and her abilities questioned. Each smile she offered masked the exhaustion and emotional bruises she carried home at the end of each day. Today felt no different. Busy hallways, endless calls for assistance, and the usual undercurrents of judgment. But beneath the surface of her routine, a faint sense of anticipation stirred. Unbeknownst to her, this seemingly ordinary day was about to upend her life in ways she couldn't have imagined. As she prepared to check on a new patient, she couldn't shake the feeling that something profound awaited her, a challenge that would test her limits and redefine her purpose. Anjali's journey to becoming a nurse had been anything but easy. Born into a modest family, she had worked tirelessly to achieve her dream of serving others. Her parents, factory workers with limited means, had instilled in her the values of perseverance and compassion. Every step of her education had been a triumph against adversity, financial struggles, societal expectations, and the constant pressure of proving herself worthy in a world quick to judge her by her appearance. Anjali was known for her unwavering dedication and gentle demeanor. Her patients often spoke of her kindness, her colleagues less so. For some, her background became a convenient excuse to dismiss her capabilities. A few openly questioned why someone like her was in their midst. Others, more subtle in their prejudice, excluded her from conversations or mocked her accent behind her back. These moments hurt deeply, but Anjali chose to channel her pain into her work, believing that actions could speak louder than words. However, the emotional toll was mounting. Her long shifts left little time for herself, and the loneliness that followed her home each night was deafening. Still, she held on to the belief that her role as a nurse could make a difference. Somewhere deep inside, she clung to the hope that her kindness would one day ripple out and change perceptions. The hospital was a world of contradictions. Life and death, hope and despair coexisted within its walls. For Anjali, it was a microcosm of society's flaws and virtues. The brightly lit hallways and sterilized rooms often masked the darker undercurrents of bias and inequality. Despite the noise and chaos, she felt an eerie silence in her heart, a longing for respect and acknowledgement. Anjali's day began with the usual routine, checking vitals, administering medications, and comforting patients. Each task was a reminder of her purpose, yet also a test of her patience and strength. As she walked into one of the general wards, her gaze fell on a new patient, a frail elderly man who had been admitted overnight. His file revealed that he was an immigrant with no family nearby. She noticed a group of nurses chatting nearby, their dismissive glances directed toward the man. Words like burden and not our problem floated through the air, sharp and cutting. Anjali felt a familiar pang of anger and sadness, but pushed it aside as she approached the patient. She introduced herself softly, her voice carrying a warmth the man hadn't encountered in days. The patient's condition was deteriorating rapidly, but what alarmed Anjali more was the blatant neglect he had faced. Several routine checks had been skipped, and his charts were incomplete. When she confronted a fellow nurse about it, she was met with indifference. Why bother? He's not even a citizen, the nurse replied casually, as if the man's life held no value. Anjali's heart ached with rage and sorrow. Ignoring the snide remarks of her colleagues, she focused on the man's care. She stayed by his side, ensuring he was comfortable, adjusting his oxygen levels, and speaking to him in soothing tones. Tears welled up in his eyes as he whispered, "Thank you. I thought no one cared." The moment was both humbling and heartbreaking for Anjali. How had humanity become so conditional? She promised herself she wouldn't let prejudice dictate her actions. Her compassion for the man transcended the indifference of her peers, but she couldn't ignore the gnawing realization that systemic change was desperately needed. That evening, as Anjali reflected on the day, she felt a surge of emotions: anger, sadness, and determination. The man's gratitude had touched her deeply, but the reality of the discrimination he faced left her restless. She decided to report the neglect to the hospital administration, knowing it would likely invite backlash. Yet her conscience wouldn't allow her to stay silent. Word of Anjali's actions began to spread among the staff. Some criticized her for making waves, but others started to see her in a new light. A junior nurse approached her, admitting she had been inspired by Anjali's courage. Slowly but surely, conversations about prejudice and patient care began to surface in the break rooms and hallways. The patient, now recovering steadily, told other staff members about Anjali's kindness. His words carried a weight that statistics or reports never could. The ripple effect of her actions was undeniable. One act of compassion had begun to shift the atmosphere in the hospital. Unbeknownst to Anjali, a visitor had recorded her comforting the patient and posted the video online. Within days, it went viral, sparking conversations about healthcare discrimination and the power of empathy. Social media lit up with praise for the nurse who cared. Strangers from across the world sent messages of support, thanking Anjali for being a beacon of hope. While the attention overwhelmed her, it also brought a sense of validation she had long craved. For the first time, her actions were being celebrated rather than questioned. The hospital administration, initially hesitant, issued a statement committing to improved training on equity and compassion. Anjali's name became synonymous with change, and she found herself at the center of a movement she hadn't intended to lead. In the weeks that followed, Anjali's life transformed. The patient she had cared for was discharged and left her a heartfelt note, calling her his guardian angel. The hospital implemented new policies to address bias, and staff began to approach their work with greater awareness. For Anjali, the experience reinforced her belief in the power of small acts of kindness. She continued her work with renewed purpose, determined to honor the trust and admiration she had earned. Her story became a reminder to all: humanity transcends borders, appearances, and prejudices. As she walked the hospital corridors, she no longer felt invisible. She had found her voice, and with it, the courage to inspire others. Anjali's journey was proof that change begins with one person willing to stand up for what's right. And as she smiled at the next patient, she knew her mission was far from over.